Hey, welcome to the Wednesday night Bible study. We are at our fifth installment of the story of Joseph. We're in Genesis chapter 41, beginning chapter 41. We left Joseph in the dungeon last time. What had happened? He interpreted the dreams of the cupbearer and baker. The cupbearer's dream was interpreted as good news, not good for the baker. And then, remember, he asked the cupbearer to remember him and tell Pharaoh. So then the cupbearer resumed his job, immediately told the Pharaoh about Joseph. And Pharaoh realized the injustice done to Joseph and released him. That's what we'd like to have happened, but not what happened. That's why the last one was left with imprisoned and forgotten. This time, this installment, I'm titling Remembered. Because if you remember in chapter 40, verse 23, the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. It's a tragedy, so close to a chance for freedom, but it didn't happen. But Jesus was a man of faith, as I said. He continued to wait, continued to trust, continued to hope, and continued to lean on God. Being in chapter 41, when 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning, his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. So here that's the setup. 2 full years have passed since the cupbearer was released. 2 years. That's a long time to be forgotten. After all that Joseph had been through, he'd been obedient. God was with him in the past. Could it be that God was still at work in his life? Well, we'll get back to Joseph, the Pharaoh, and his dreams in a minute. But I want to bring up another Bible character who had a lot of hardship, and that was Job. The story of Job. Job gave a statement of his faith in Job chapter 23, verse 10 and 12. This was Job. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. My feet have closely followed his steps. I have kept it to his way without turning aside. I have not departed from the commands of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my daily bread. So Job wrote, when he has tested me, not like a test like an exam, but like trials and tribulations for growth. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. There's no hurry-up process for finding and shaping gold. You have to discover it, process it, purify it, and shape it. Joseph was in the process of being refined as pure gold. It takes time. It requires waiting. Other characters. Abraham waited years and years for the promised birth of a son, Isaac. Moses didn't lead the people out of Egypt until he was 80. Noah waited 120 years for rain. All these people were being shaped to do good work for God, and so was Joseph. So back to the story. It was 2 full years that Pharaoh had had his dream. It was 2 years, and then Pharaoh had his dream we just read. 2 dreams. Dreams that he remembered when he woke up. He sent for his musicians and wise men to interpret the dreams. The term magicians back then meant men versed in the sacred writings. Pharaoh wasn't looking for magic. He wanted to ask the most intelligent, as wise as they were, but they couldn't tell him what his dream meant. They could have made something up, but he didn't. They didn't do that. Admire their honesty there. But his talk of dreams caused a light bulb to go off from one person there. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captains of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, the servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged." Interesting how the cupbearer put that. I am reminded of my shortcomings. What was his shortcoming? The fact that he forgot to tell about Joseph. So then what happens? Verse 14. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." When Pharaoh heard that there was someone who was good at interpreting dreams, he said, "Go get him." Joseph didn't know any of this was taking place in the palace. He had no idea what was coming. Imagine how surprised he was that he's suddenly set free. Joseph did a smart thing. Instead of rushing to Pharaoh's presence, he first cleaned himself up. You know the importance of first impressions. Joseph was probably pretty dirty and tattered and probably heavily bearded. He got himself looking presentable and stands before Pharaoh, the one man more than any other who can give him his freedom. Imagine that moment. Contrast between years in a dingy dungeon, and this moment. And Joseph finds out right away what this is all about. Interpret a dream and the future could be a lot better for him. Reading between the lines, it's tell me what my dream means and I'll make it worth your while. And then what a humble, bold thing Joseph says. I can't do it. I'm not one with the answers. Wouldn't it have been tempting just to answer, sure, I can do it? Or worse, say, why should I tell you? You wronged me. That's my dog in the background. Instead he says, I can't do it. But I serve a God who does have the answers. We'll both listen to him and he'll tell us what he wants us to learn. See what it says Joseph said in verse 16. Is that up there? Yes. God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. That's the translation, but what Joseph says literally from Hebrew is God will give Pharaoh peace. You've heard the Hebrew word shalom meaning peace. Joseph says, Pharaoh, God will bring shalom to you. It'll remove your troubled feelings and it'll be the right answer. Why? Because it's from God. How could Joseph be so bold, so confident, yet so humble? Maybe a big part of it was that he had that time to be refined like gold. He'd been tried by the fire of affliction. His external circumstances may have been almost unbearable for years, but his internal conditions had been turned into pure gold. During the whole time of his troubles, his eyes were on God. God's plan was unfolding for Joseph, for Egypt, and for God's people. It was God's timing. Now I'm going to skip verses 17 through 24 because Pharaoh just tells the two dreams to Joseph. But now beginning in verse 25, let's move to 25. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. Joseph then continued with some insights. I know we're losing everything on the bottom here. Sorry about that. Verse 28. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all of the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that allows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in two forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. Notice that Joseph says God has shown Pharaoh what needs to be done, that Pharaoh can do something with the information about the famines. He also explains that what is going to happen is a sure thing. In other words, Pharaoh can count on the abundance followed by the famine and the timing. Why can Pharaoh count on it? Because God has decided, and God will do it. Notice all the way through his answer, Joseph refers to God. Joseph never calls attention to himself. He points Pharaoh to God, to Jehovah. Joseph then adds a few words of counsel. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain until under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. So Joseph recommends that Pharaoh needs someone to execute a large plan. He gives very specific words of advice for procedures that need to be followed. Egypt was going to need a strict, well-organized rationing process. So Egypt was going to need a good manager with discipline, foresight, and someone who could be trusted. What we don't hear Joseph say is, I like the job, I should do it. But what does Pharaoh do? The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man, in whom is the Spirit of God? There Joseph stood right before him. He met all the requirements. But even then, when it seemed appropriate for Joseph to volunteer, Joseph held back. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Well, now that's a pretty impressive job Joseph just got handed to him. And pretty impressive self-control on Joseph's part. He was absent any selfish ambition, and it wasn't him trying to promote himself. He didn't try to manipulate the outcome or even drop hints. He simply stood there and waited. Joseph had learned to let the Lord have his way, and let the Lord do it in his time, and do it for his purposes. So from prison to promotion to running Egypt, not too shabby. But none of it came from Joseph's power. Have you ever maneuvered or plotted to get your own way and then lived to regret it? So here's some words to think about. If God was in it, God would do it. If God was in it, God would do it. That's where we're going to stop here. Things are looking up for Joseph. He has been remembered. And we'll continue with the story. In the meantime, take care, be safe, and may the Lord be with you.